Well, welcome back to Open to Truth, a podcast all about exploring big ideas and discovering truth together. My name's Clint.
Hi, I'm Tony. Welcome back.
And this week I'd like to talk about iconography.
Oh, great. Let's double click on that.
Yeah. Double click.
I planned that for a while. Sorry.
Okay. That just means to look at it more closely.
To inspect more closely, like you would with an icon on a desktop. Yeah.
Sure. This was brought to our attention by a listener.
Oh, yeah, Brad, if you're listening, this one's for you. Brad was requesting that we do an episode talking about iconography, and I think it's a little more familiar for Brad, having grown up in like a Catholic church where there is a little more emphasis on icons. So I told him from the get-go, and I'll say again, there wasn't, I don't think, a whole heap of iconography going on in my upbringing and in the churches that I've attended. So it's somewhat of a new sort of area for me, but I'm totally willing to talk about it. I think it's interesting.
Yeah, so let's define the terms.
Yep.
That's going to be super helpful here.
Yep.
An icon, what is that? So, because I do think how it's defined is going to do a lot of the work and the ethical judgment of it. And I think there are some other related terms that need to be held in balance here. So maybe just lay them out. There's an icon, there's art, and there's an idol.
Oof.
Oh, now that one at the end.
That has a bad feeling.
I've learned to not like that word.
Yeah.
Idol bad.
Idol
right?
bad, yeah.
And I think a key reason is from Scripture. There is this commandment, thou shalt not create a graven image.
Yep.
Or create idols.
Yep, it does say that.
Don't do that.
Deuteronomy 20.
Maybe that's a better place to start. Just
what's being prohibited there?
Yeah.
Let me just read it. Can I?
Sure.
At least read some scripture for us? This is from, I'll read the New Living Translation. This is from actually Exodus 20, verse 4. I was wrong.
This is the first occurrence of the law? The 10 Commandments, the Decalogue?
I don't know. Is that Exodus 20?
Yeah, I think that would be the first instance. Okay. Yeah.
This is New Living Translation. You must not make for yourself an idol of any kind or an image of anything in the heavens or on the earth or in the sea. Now that seems really prohibitive. Like if you just take that
Let's just take the first part where it's using the word idol.
You must not make for yourself an idol of any kind.
So I immediately think of, just in my mind, a little statue.
Yep.
A carving, maybe out of wood, or someone's hewn it out of stone.
Yes, if I could just add, verse 5 adds some clarity here.
Oh, okay.
It's not a prohibition against art in general. So the two verses together, you shall not make for yourself an idol in the form of anything in the heavens above or on the earth below or in the waters beneath. That would be an outlaw on art. Don't do that. Verse 5, you shall not bow down to them or worship them.
Good.
For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquities of the fathers on their children to the third and fourth generations of those who hate me. Okay, we'll stop there.
Got it.
Yeah.
So, wow.
So it's really the worshipping of the idols.
To me, that I'm totally on board with that. And I guess the reason for it would be I only want to worship things that are worthy of worship.
Yeah. Yeah.
And to me, to be worthy of worship means that you have worship-worthy properties. And what are those properties? Moral perfection, maybe a certain amount of power, a certain amount of knowledge that's worthy of my genuflecting, to my bowing. And I think of bowing when it's done in a non-coercive way.
Yep.
Typically, when I'm bowing down to power alone, that is, there's something not worshipful necessarily about that.
Yep.
Maybe more out of fear, or I just don't want something bad to happen to me. But when it has this, when it's a great making property or something worthy of adulation, when it's worshipful, it's a property that's really good. And I can think of no better property of goodness than moral perfection.
Yeah.
So that's the pinnacle of worship worthiness. So I would like to only be worshiping that which is worthy of it, which is God himself. I'm building that into my concept of God. God is a title that a being has that you get when you are morally perfect.
Yep. So maybe this is the realm of speculation a little bit, but
so thus the conclusion then is that I would not worship an idol because it does not have the property of moral perfection. It, after all, is a
made with human
created
hands.
thing that has no agency and capable of moral decision making.
I hear what you're saying. I'm on board. I think that makes sense. Where I want to maybe push back is were these people really worshipping the physical idol? Or is the idol a representation of a spiritual reality, an entity, God, however you want to think about it? And the idol is just sort of a stand-in. Like when I think about an icon on a computer, the icon on your desktop is not the application. It's not the program. It's something that represents the program. And when you click on it, then you get to participate in the actual application. So when I think about idols, graven images, is it so bad to have an icon that would be something that represent? It's not the thing in itself. It's not the thing that you're worshiping, but it points to the thing that you're worshiping, or it reminds you of the thing that you're worshiping, or it allows you to keep your attention focused on the thing that you're supposed to be worshiping. Is that what they were doing? Or are we saying these people were literally worshiping rocks and gold calves and stuff? I understand that there's some chronological snobbery that can happen where we sort of think about the ancient people as being stupid.
Yeah.
But I don't think they were. I mean, in many ways, they didn't know a lot that we do. But
you find it hard to imagine that that's what...
I do. Maybe I'm giving them too much credit. But
this little carving.
Yeah, I find it hard to believe that anybody would really think the carving itself is the divine thing. Maybe there's plenty of people who think that somehow spirits like attach to physical objects, and certain objects can carry demons with them or whatever it happens to be. But I want to push back and why would this have been forbidden?
No, that's good.
And the best argument I can think of is that although an icon might be a stand-in for something and point to something else, if the thing that it's trying to point to is so unlike it that it actually is unhelpful to have an icon, then I could see why you might forbid any attempt to make an image. Like, I can understand the perspective from God of, look, as God, I am so unlike anything you've ever encountered that any image you try to make to capture what I'm like is going to mislead more than it's going to direct you towards me. So you're better off not making any images because I'm not like a rock and I'm not like a cow.
And for the purpose of worship.
Yeah.
You mean?
I guess so, yeah.
Because this is where it's helpful to bring in the notion of art. I would find it a genuinely crazy view that you would think the God of the universe has a prohibition against art.
Oh, man. Yeah.
I'm just not probably going to believe that view.
Yeah.
That we can't like depict stories from the Bible or representations of Jesus on the cross or just an empty cross indicating resurrection. I mean, there's so many.
That seems totally fine.
It does seem fine. It seems helpful.
Definitely when you bring in Jesus. I mean, he was a person. He's a human.
Right.
So there is a way you can draw him and represent what he might have looked like.
Or that you would, and coupling that with the view that other art is fine, but the moment you talk about things that matter most,
you don't draw those. Yeah.
That's bizarre. So it can't mean that.
It can't be that.
You're allowed to create pieces of artwork. The question you're bringing up a good point, is like, what is were those people actually worshiping pieces of art? That does seem dumb in a way.
Yes.
So I don't want to impugn that to those people. And you're right. I don't think that's what they were doing. It's something more of like a conduit.
Yeah.
I think maybe what I would push back on, or like maybe modern people, the piece that they're not endorsing is that these things don't have metaphysical gravitas in the sense that they are like carrying a spirit within them.
Yes.
Or almost like a talisman.
Yeah.
I've just said a buzzword.
Yeah, I know. I like it though.
A totem that is itself a vessel for a spiritual reality that's in some way, and like that the spirit is not over here.
Yeah, but it is there.
It's there.
Localized in the object.
And that you somehow were able to do that with Yahweh and contain him in this little vessel that I can just put my adulation toward that thing.
Where's Yahweh? He's over there. Yeah.
And I think that's what
we want to reject.
We're resisting.
Yeah.
Now I don't know. Like, I mean, I'm no biblical scholar. I'm by trade a philosopher and a shepherd of a local flock, a congregation. But I could see how someone would say that seems like a little bit of what's going on in the Old Testament. The Holy of Holies, the Ark of the Covenant, is kind of a repository of the presence of God. Now, whether that's just a locale that God wants to manifest himself at times, or is it saying that actually is? I mean, I'm sure it's not trying to say that it is an idol. That would be pretty woefully contradictory.
As you were saying that, I was just reminded of, this is from Acts 7. I'm actually not sure who's speaking here, but he's talking about the temple. Our fathers had the tabernacle of the testimony with them in the wilderness. It was constructed exactly as God had directed Moses, according to the pattern he had seen. And the tabernacle was supposedly the dwelling place of God with his people in this tent. And our fathers who received it brought it in with Joshua. When they dispossessed the nations God drove out before them, it remained until the time of David, who found favor in the sight of God and asked to provide a dwelling place for the God of Jacob. But it was Solomon who built the house for him. However, the Most High does not dwell in houses made by human hands. As the prophet says, "Heaven is my throne, and the earth is my footstool. What kind of house will you build for me, says the Lord, or where will my place of repose be? Has not my hand made all these things?" So there's sort of this argument that, like, if we're talking about the God who made literally everything, how are you going to make something that can house it, him, she? It almost just doesn't make sense. It's like a category mistake when we're talking about this God. The idea that he would dwell in a localized place. And yet they did. That's how they lived for hundreds of years, with a temple and a Holy of Holies, and that the manifest presence of God being in there. So how is that? If the fear with idols and images, if the reason that was prohibited was this localization of Yahweh, why is the temple okay? And why is that encouraged for them?
Well, I mean, you're bringing up...
Not that I expect you to know.
No, my knee-jerk reaction these days is to just... I have to remember that I don't place equal weight on all pieces of scripture.
Yeah.
I think that there's like a trajectory, an evolution of faith taking place in the scripture themselves. And it's a record of what people were thinking about what God is like and the human condition.
Yep.
And so I would have to bring all that to bear in the discussion of like, oh, of course, ancient Israelites thought this about Yahweh.
Yeah.
And like that God wanted to be at a place.
Yeah.
Everyone was doing
That's
that.
How they all,
there were ziggurats and whole temples built. Yeah.
Yep. So
I see the New Testament author there, a speaker, challenging that notion.
Yeah.
The whole temple idea.
Given what's revealed in Jesus, maybe we've been thinking about where God's presence is the wrong way. Yeah. Yeah. Fair enough. Well, so then modern day iconography, and let's say, well, where is the line for you between an icon and art? Or maybe there isn't. Like a pic. You walk into a cathedral, there's Jesus on a cross. Some statue or depiction of the Lord.
I guess, man.
Is that art? Is it an icon?
And maybe I'm too close to conflating icon and idol.
Yeah.
Forgive me if I am,
Okay.
but I do view an icon as having, it's a functional definition. It's like money. It's something that's used in a worship setting. It's art used in worship.
Sure. Yeah. Great. Thank you. That's helpful.
Is that right?
That's right.
Okay.
So I want to know, my intuition doesn't tell me that I'm doing something wrong if I were to gaze at a depiction of the crucifixion. I'm looking at this thing. I'm internally coming to terms with what happened to Jesus on the cross and maybe what that meant. And I'm praying to God internally as I sort of am moved by this artwork. And it's keeping somehow my attention and my emotions sort of centered around this event, the crucifixion. That doesn't seem bad to me. I'm not praying to the statue. I don't think it's alive. I don't think there's a spirit living on it or in it or anything like that. Yeah. But it's a helpful tool for attention direction. Is that wrong? That seems fine to me. Where's the danger? No?
Yeah, man. I think that's okay. I would wonder about its usage in the liturgy for that community of saints, whether there was a ethos of like, that's how you pray. Like, don't go, this is kind of like the special conduit.
Got it.
There needs to be a crucifix in the home. Or like this is kind of like the centralization of God's presence.
Yeah.
I think if that theology is creeping in through the usage of that thing, then that starts to worry me, not like in some like crazy way. I start to think it's incorrect.
Right.
So I would encourage that congregation to try praying or communing with the God of the universe without the icon. I think you're saying like, why not? Like that could be helpful. Yeah. But also, I think part of spiritual growth would be doing it without the icon.
Yeah. That makes sense to me.
Like, or another way of putting it is, does constant iconography usage cripple
the muscle you should be developing of practicing the presence of God everywhere at all times?
That's right.
So in that sense, it could be unhelpful.
And maybe I'm totally like, and I've never been part of a Catholic church or Eastern Orthodox. I certainly feel like this is happening a lot in other religions too. I'm thinking of like little Buddhas and
shrines
stuff.
And yeah.
So I don't have experiential usage, knowledge of using that in my spiritual life. But even from like movies and stuff, I'm thinking of like little priests or nuns or people clutching their crucifix.
Yeah, right.
El Diablo.
Yeah.
And this is there's metaphysical spiritual oomph in this little talisman that is warding off.
It keeps the demons at bay.
That wigs me.
Yeah, I want to reject that. I've always wanted to reject that. That if I am a Christian, if we mean anything by that it needs to be an incarnational theology. The idea that God he's made his dwelling place, man, he lives in me. Then this talisman is not going to be the thing that protects me from evil spirits. If anything does, it will be the God that lives in me, you know?
Yeah.
So
back to your point though about that I think is really interesting, of one of the reasons perhaps to reject, like maybe like the reasoning from God for that commandment you said was, look, I'm so other, I'm so holy that anything that you try to do to describe me falls short.
Yeah.
So what do we think of that? Is that the case?
I know some blokes who preach that way. They'll quiz you. What's more like God, an angel or an amoeba in the toilet? They're both equally unlike God.
Oh.
Neither of them is more like God than the other.
Wow.
I don't know how I feel about that. So I feel like if the angel is sentient, that's something. Anyway. But so you get the idea.
This is a topic sometimes described as divine ineffability, the inability to be described or captured in human thought or word.
What can you say about God, if anything?
So there's a whole tradition called, I think it's apophatism, which is, or atheology, which is, you can only use negative statements when talking about God. God is not whatever.
Yeah.
The word would be, I don't know.
Wicked.
Malicious.
Yeah. Right. There's similarities there with some of these Eastern traditions like Taoism that talk about the Tao, the great flow of all things. One of the opening lines in the Tao Te Ching is, the Tao that can be named is not the Tao. It's like, you can't say anything about it. If you can say anything about it, you're not really talking about it. You know, that's one of the sort of claims, which was why Taoism is so hard to wrap your head around, because it's all riddles and mysteries and paradoxes, and they're never speaking plainly, because according to them, you can't speak plainly about this mystery. And I'm sure there's some rules of not rules, segments of like Christian mysticism or whatever that would probably subscribe to this. So it's like, there's a degree of unknowing that you need. Unknowing is a word that gets thrown around in Christian mystical circles a lot.
Yeah.
Like St. John of the Cross's cloud of unknowing. It's actually coming to know God is a doing away with all the things that you do know to find yourself resting in the ground of being, or something like that. It's a very mystical claim.
Yeah, that's mystical, mysterious.
Yeah.
Interesting, man. I think, my tradition that I come from prizes divine revelation. And so the degree to which that's happening at all seems like the very act of even having that as a category means that there's a truth claim being made that I now have access to that I would not have otherwise.
What else could revelation mean?
I am closer to ascertaining the truth of ultimate reality than I would have been without the divine revelation.
Yep.
If you are on board with any kind of divine or special revelation, then you have to be. That's kind of what's going on, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm fine with someone saying, perhaps, I think it's, man, forgive me, everyone that knows more about this than me, but I think Aquinas and some other medieval philosophers were really big on metaphorical or analogical descriptions being okay. Like, all we can ever hope to do with our thought and language is to, like, by analogy describe God. We're not actually getting at the real deal, the real essence, but we're using analogy or metaphor.
Isn't that, forgive me if this is too far afield, isn't that just the case with language in general? Isn't all language metaphor for experience of some kind?
Maybe.
When I use the word sad, it is not sad. It's not sadness. It's referring to an experience that you have had, that I have had, and we're both naming that together. Why would that be different when we talk about God?
Well, now, yeah, you are getting into like a difficult philosophy of language topic as to what are you asking there? You are asking about why do any of our words, little utterances that we've made up, starts to get weird when you really reflect on
mouth noises, meat flaps. Yeah.
That, why does that connect with any experience at all?
Yeah.
And is that capturing it in any way?
Or for a word to mean anything, for it to be meaningful, it needs to sort of attach to some experiential reality in some way. Right.
And I think, like, we've done a whole podcast on communication efforts, but I think there's something to like, for me to understand what you're saying, let's assume we are understanding realists. We think that communication really happens. And so what that means is when I use a word, I'm bringing to the table my experiential background, the cultural norms surrounding the usage of that word, the usage of it successfully in other modes of talk. And so when I say the word sad, you have, and we're realists about communication, that it happens, you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah.
That you also now share the mental state of sad in the sense that you understood the conceptual content.
Yes.
Whether or not that word is a metaphor or how you want to describe how it latches on to that state of affairs of sadness, you got what I meant.
Yeah.
And so we can now wonder then, we could ask a question, was God ever sad? Or is God ever sad?
Yeah.
And I don't think that I'm purely being metaphorical or only approximately true, that my human words can never latch on to ultimate reality. I think that they can.
Latch on, yeah.
I mean, I know what it's like. I know what it's like to be sad. And I can ask the question coherently, is God ever sad?
Yep.
That's what whether the answer to that question is knowable, that's different.
Yeah.
Maybe I am unable to know whether God is sad or not.
Yeah.
The question we're asking right here and with iconography is the question even coherent?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And it is coherent.
Well, I think so.
Yeah, okay.
Others would say no.
Right.
That your meager human concept of sadness could never latch on to whatever great reality the divine would have of that emotion.
Yeah, okay. I got what you're saying.
But see, I'm coming from the perspective, I take pretty seriously the notion of like the imago Dei, or the image of God, and that as a human being, I bear that in a significant way. We could spin our wheels about what that means, but I think that means, at least to some degree, I am having, that I and the divine have similar in kind of experiences.
Yeah.
Maybe not of scale.
Yep.
I don't have knowledge to the depth or gravity or scope that the divine has, but I'm a knowing thing.
Yeah.
And I'm participating in that
creative thing. Yeah. All of that. I think the strongest argument you make there is that one from, if you believe in revelation at all, then God must be knowable in some sense.
Or I could say, or how about this? Maybe this is helpful. It seems like my tools of the human apparatus of language, I'm able to talk about all of the cosmos at once. That's what's really neat about our concept.
Yeah.
So when I'm looking at this microphone before me for our audio only listeners, and I can just kind of wonder, everything in the universe is either an apple or a non-apple. So I just said a sentence, a claim that talks about everything in the cosmos, right?
Yeah.
And this microphone is
It's part
included.
of the cosmos. Yeah.
It's a non-apple. And so I want to say, like, is God part of all things that exist? I think yes. I think God is an existing thing. And so my speech, I captured God in that
Yep. In that wide net that you
in
cast.
that proposition that I cast forth through an English sentence. God is also a non-apple, right?
Yeah.
So that to me is an example of the way that my human speech is equipped to wrestle God into my control in that way. Not that I am, I'm not forcing things to be true about God. He has the truth independently of any of my powers. Rather, I have descriptive capability.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
That seems right.
Now again, I did select one that was in line with like the negative theology.
Right. He's a non-apple.
I didn't attribute a positive property. He's not an apple.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. You said a moment ago that you don't feel like you've experienced using an icon in worship. I just want to push back a little bit, maybe, and wonder, in the contemporary Christian worship setting.
I meant as a regular part of my life, but maybe you're going to push back on that as well.
Well, I'm just thinking there's plenty of times we're singing a song at church and there's an image of Jesus, or it's not actually, obviously, Jesus, but some drawing or photo representation of a cross or Christ on a cross. And what is that? Is that icon use as you sort of dwell on that image and are worshipping? Or no, because you're not in any way saying the picture has some juju on it or the God's dwelling in the picture or something like that.
Oh, man. Wow.
I mean, and it doesn't even have to be, I don't know if this would count as iconography. It's not always depictions of Jesus or a cross. It could be creation, it could be mountains, beautiful landscapes that are designed to evoke something in you about wonder or beauty or awe, and that should facilitate how you're thinking about God and interacting with him in those moments. Is that modern day icon use, or is that just art serving its function to point to the true, good, and beautiful?
I would go with the latter, I think. Or the other consistent choice would be to say yes to the former, and that it's okay to include them in worship.
Yeah.
But is that then embracing idolatry? And
well, idol, see, that word really has gotten stretched.
Stigmatized. Yeah.
Idol? I mean, anything apparently can be an idol. You can make an idol out of your kids, and you can make an idol out of sports, and you can make an idol out of your car. You said earlier you try to only worship things worthy of worship, and you talked about bowing and genuflecting and all of that.
And I've been known to do that to things that aren't worthy of worship.
Okay, yeah.
I've sinned.
Okay, all right. Well,
I've fallen short.
I am just curious to know how do you know when something is an idol?
It's taken priority over things that are worthy of worship, perhaps.
Priority.
I've put my meaning or my significance into it. My identity is wrapped up into it.
I mean, I kind of know it when I feel it, you know, when something has consumed me in a way that's not healthy or helpful, or I've placed more value on it than really I should. I know what that feels like. Do you think that's an okay way to understand idolatry as the original command was supposed to prohibit? Like, is it the same thing that we're guilty of in our cars and our sports or whatever we happen to idolize?
Sure. As I sit here now, I think so. Maybe I'm super wrong about this, but
no.
I'm trying to think too of how, like, what are we really talking about here? So, like, in the Catholic Church, from what I understand, I mean, you walk into one, and it's quite a bit more like materialized. There's like little statues.
There's lots of art
of saints
Yep.
and Mary.
Stained glass depictions of all the different saints.
There's a rosary. It's something that like you're encouraged to keep with you quite a bit. Most Catholic homes would have a crucifix in it. I kind of jokingly talk with Sarah's family. I call it the religious area. It had
they have a shrine.
Some old palm branches from a Palm Sunday. It had the family Bible, and there was this whole kind of
like
thing in the living room.
That's a shrine.
That's a little bit like
what
a shrine.
What else is a shrine if not that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they would certainly be upset if it were besmirched. If someone just took down the crucifix,
so it's sacred in some way,
threw it into the fireplace.
Yeah, man. So that's something. See, it happens with Bibles too. I remember when I was a kid or something.
Don't leave that on the floor.
Sitting on a Bible or chucking a Bible and being roused on for that. It's like, well, it's just a book. It's just ink. It's paper and pages.
Yeah,
that's not the thing. It points to the thing. I don't know.
So that could be. I mean, maybe those are symptoms of. But also, I understand why people would want something to be respected.
Sure. I mean, don't come and trash the church. We get. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know if the keeping the rosary on you, I don't know if that's, correct me if I'm wrong, Catholics out there. I don't think that's so much like I need to keep a tchotchke that has juju on it with me, so much as it is like it's a prayer tool, right? You're kind of counting the beads while you, now I don't know what the value is in saying a Hail Mary 8 times.
Yeah.
I don't know. We can talk about liturgical prayer another time, but I have found, remember when we did that spiritual exercise before I left sabbatical, dude came to our all staff and was leading us through some contemplation stuff. And we each had like 5 stones.
Yes.
And he kind of encouraged us to take something that's been percolating in your mind, something that's bothering you, an anxiety or worry, whatever, sort of mentally attach it so that the stone represents that thing and go set it down to the side. And do that 5 times or until you run out of stones. Set those issues on the table. Really, this is just sort of a psychological trick to get you, to give yourself permission to not dwell on those things in this moment, but instead I'm going to dwell on God. The rocks don't have juju. They're not protecting me from spirits.
Nope.
It's just a little psychological
It doesn't mean
trick.
that you are done with those worries now.
They kept popping up. So I hadn't actually placed them on the table, you know.
Yeah.
I think the rosary is doing something similar to that. But then again, maybe that's not how it's treated by most people who carry one around. I don't know. If you carry a rosary with you, I'd love to know why and how do you use it throughout the day.
Yeah, I guess maybe kind of to land the plane a little bit as much as we can with the big topic. I get worried when there's any kind of like imputation of special powers to some kind of just little
material object.
Yeah.
Even communion.
Wow.
Right? Eucharist?
Even communion. Yes. Yeah. And that we need to rely on that thing to access God in some way. That troubles me.
Sure.
I just don't know, like, and maybe I have a caricature in my mind. I don't know to what degree either the ancients or modern regular practitioners of iconography have that in their mindset. Like,
yes.
I can't. My experience of God will be lackluster if I'm not doing it in front of a crucifix,
like a booster.
Or
signal.
I don't know if you really can communicate with Mary or the saints, but to think if you do think that I'm not going to be able to really do that without one of their little statues being present.
Like it's for better cell reception to God or something.
Yeah,
it's a
yeah.
Cell tower.
I just think, and I'm not too worried about like so much that God is really upset by all this, rather than just like that doesn't strike me as correct theology.
Don't need it. Yeah, well, I'm curious. I mean, if I think it's been pretty traditional to say that God is omnipresent. We can argue about what that means exactly. But yeah, I'm wondering, what does this have to do with the localized manifest presence of God? Is that something that still happens in a special way? Whether or not it's attached to a tchotchke, you can walk into churches and hear very common, wow, God is in this place. They'll say that. Oh, do you feel the presence of God? God's here. As opposed to like not in the parking lot or not when I was at home. And I don't know what I think about that. I mean, I will say I encounter God in more and less intense ways at different times in my life. There are experiences I can point to as being, moving in a way that having my breakfast this morning wasn't. Does that mean it wasn't spiritual to have my breakfast? I mean, I kind of think the whole thing is spiritual. But
and people likely have more. I don't know, maybe this isn't true, but it seems like it, that people have more religious experiences at a religious service of some kind. And I think part of that might be you're kind of getting yourself ready. You're in the right state of mind to experience that.
I think there's a lot that goes into the kind of experiences you have.
And wouldn't it be great if we were in more of that posture in our regular everyday life? I don't think there's something special about the sanctuary.
Yeah, right.
You know, to your point.
It's made with human hands. It's just a building.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, let me maybe just final question for you.
Okay.
Maybe this is off topic. Those moments when you are, say, in a worship service and you sense God's presence, an awareness of God's presence that you don't normally have, is that more, would you say, to do with your awareness in that moment or something actually being different about that moment? I'm more inclined to say that these worship services can help you move into a state where you become aware of something that's been true the whole time in a way that you aren't normally, whether it's through emotive music and rhythmic drumming and chant, like singing in a large group. I mean, all of those for thousands of years have shown to sort of induce these states. So it's not surprising to me that that would happen in a church, but I don't know that I want to say we summoned the Spirit of God this morning in a way that if we mean anything by God living in us as Christians, then he is always with you, right? It has to be more about my attention and focus and awareness. I don't know.
The summoning. I have a problem with that. And that's good. Maybe that gets to the heart of the issue with like bad usage of iconography or idolatry, is that desire to have God submit to your rules, and you're gonna show up now, and I have you on my mantle whenever I need you. You're right there.
Yeah,
I can walk away when I'm done.
Yeah,
and then I come back. It's just so much on your terms.
Yes.
I don't want to go too far and say that even our own language is a form of idolatry. Like you said a sentence, you're trying to capture God. No.
Yeah.
Like when I said that God is a non-apple. That is just like, to me, that's a necessity of what human language is even doing.
Yeah.
I haven't like made God submit to my will in that way.
No. Yeah, I know what you mean. That's an interesting thought.
And maybe it is ultimately in the attitude of the practitioner. What are you bringing to the table when you approach a piece of art? And when it transforms into an icon, then suddenly it's a conduit of worship.
Yeah.
Of sorts. How much power are you giving that thing and not paying attention to the real thing?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, I don't know, Brad, if that was helpful for you. It's interesting for us, at least. I'd love to know if you've grown up in a more traditional liturgical setting, one that involves icons and rosaries and whatever. Write to us. Let us know if those are helpful for you, if you've ever found them to be a hindrance. How do you engage with them? Is it something you're doing every day? Do you feel distant from God when you're not near your icon? I don't know. So we would just love to learn.
Yeah.
That's what we're all about here, finding truth through conversation. So write to the show. You can leave a comment on this video if you're watching on YouTube, of course, or if you're driving or whatever, you can shoot us an email sometime at mailbag@opentotruth.com, and we'd love to interact with your questions and comments. Yeah, we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, there's also a weekly blog. You can get that at opentotruth.com/subscribe. Just one weekly email, 2 to 4 minute little philosophical nugget based on that week's episode for your morning.
Yeah, it's good for your brain and good for your soul.
Wow.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening, guys. We'll see you next time. Stay curious.